Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Spotlight. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about 1989's License to Kill. Let's go ahead and get this rolling. I will say, in the very short time Timothy Dalton has been Bond, he has been definitely one of the better ones. There's only been 4 so far, with Sean Connery, George Lazenby, Roger Moore, and then now Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton definitely does put his staple down as Bond, though. Like how I talked about in last episode, it seemed like that they were focusing more on action, and that holds true to this movie as well. And this movie definitely explores the darker side of Bond, which I absolutely loved. I thought that this is definitely one of the best Bond films so far that I've seen. So it is a shame that he did only do 2 Bond films, but I guess that there were some legality issues and he eventually dropped it because his contract was up. However, this movie is fantastic. So this movie does start off with a wedding, which, if history repeats itself, which typically it does, starts off with a wedding, and anytime there's a wedding, usually shit hits the fan. Last time we really saw Bond in a wedding was for his own, with George Lazenby, and his wife was murdered in a drive-by, which is very sad. However, what this movie does do is reference George Lazenby once again, because his buddy in the CIA, Felix Leiter, who was in Live or Let Die with Roger Moore, does reference that he was once married and will never again get married because his wife was murdered. Again, referencing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which is awesome. I love that they go back and reference other movies, and it seems like that they really reference that movie a lot, with Roger Moore standing over the grave of his wife and putting down flowers, and then now this. It seems like that movie really holds a staple in the franchise, which I absolutely love, because George Lazenby only did do 1 Bond, and I don't know if that's necessarily because it's his Bond or because of the story. Regardless, I'm really happy that they keep going back and referencing that movie. So last episode I kept talking about how these Bond films are starting to take like a darker tone to the franchise and more realistic. And you can really tell that with how the villains kill, because usually it just be like a quick little like gunshot and they're dead. In this movie, Franz Sanchez almost tortures Felix, but tries to kill him by dunking him in a shark tank, and then the shark comes up and like nibbles at him and takes off pieces of his body, and you're watching it. Like, the camera's on this action that is happening, which is completely different tone than what the other movies would do. Like, you wouldn't really watch someone get tortured like that. And not to mention, the villain in this does kill Felix's wife just to further the line of torturing him. I don't believe Felix actually dies. He is just in the hospital in the ICU. And naturally, because Bond does take it personal whenever his buddy in the CIA gets tortured and almost brutally killed like this, he takes it personally and has a vendetta against Franz Sanchez. Disobeys his orders from M to go do missions and continue the Bond missions across the world, and he revokes his license to kill.
Effective immediately. Your license to kill is revoked.
But that doesn't mean anything to Bond, because he is going to go after and hunt down and kill Sanchez. And what's really fascinating about this movie, too, that I absolutely love is, I don't know if this is his first movie or it's early on in his career, but a young Benicio Del Toro is in this movie and actually gets his ass kicked by Bond. And in my opinion, that's a high honor, getting your ass kicked by Bond. You know, he just plays the right-hand man to Franz Sanchez and kind of is the muscle, if you will, which is funny because in this movie, Benicio Del Toro doesn't really look like a muscle, but ultimately that's what he is. He's the heavy in it. And Bond really exercises his license to kill in this. The CIA agent who actually betrayed Felix and broke Sanchez out of prison was killed by Bond in a very brutal way, in the way that Felix was actually killed. Bond is standing over him, and the CIA agent who double-crossed Felix is like begging for his life, and he's like, hey, there's $1 million or $2 million over there. We'll split it it's all yours and all mine, buddy. And Bond is like, nope, not for me, because you betrayed my friend and you're gonna die for it, and just throws him in the shark tank, which is absolutely awesome in my opinion. I love when James Bond takes no prisoners and just absolutely lets loose, and that is definitely what he does in this movie. He just lets it rip, which I absolutely love, because the Roger Moore ones, yes, well, they were campy and fun and they had quips here and there. Timothy Dalton doesn't really take shit from anybody, and he lets you know it. And of course, Bond does end up saving the day, if you will. It's more so getting revenge for his friend Felix in such great fashion. They have a chase scene at the end with semis, and he catches up to Fran Sanchez, and he gets covered in oil. And earlier in the movie, Felix gave Bond a lighter as like a best man gift, and it has like the date of the wedding on it. And Bond shows Fran Sanchez the lighter and lights him on fire and just walks away, you know? Because that's what you do after you light the guy who basically killed your best friend. You just light him on fire and leave him to die. Also, naturally, because Benicio Del Toro, this was early on in his career and he's the heavy, naturally he does have to die, because that's just, you know, basic movie making, it seems like. And the way he dies is very, you know, ties into the whole, like, dark, gruesome theme. There's a grinder that, like, breaks up bricks, and they try to throw Bond in there, and while he is almost going to fall in it and die, Benicio Del Toro ends up falling into it, and it just, like, lets you watch it, and then you hear him scream, and it's just, you normally wouldn't see that in a Bond film prior to this, so this does take a more realistic approach to the Bond character and, like, kind of the things that he would go through and the situations that he'd be put in. Definitely putting a staple down for Daniel Craig, who will come in later and basically take that mantle. So I know I talked about this last episode, but I did look into it just a little bit. Apparently, because of the AIDS epidemic, the Bond producers did not want to promote sex. So that's why I guess that there's been a shortage of Bond being suave and seducing women, which honestly, like I said last time, I'm perfectly okay with it, because if it doesn't have any relevance to the story, why is it in the movie? And this really allows them to focus on the story, to focus on the character, and to focus more on action set pieces and action scenes and chase scenes, that I absolutely love that they are taking that approach. I actually gave this film 4.5 stars, so thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.